it's often the scenarios where we go through the most challenges and our heartstrings are pulled for one reason or the other in the hardest of directions that the bracha comes out of.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Anything But Traditional. I'm here today with Shaena Cantor Abramowitz. She now lives on a hilltop 15 minutes away from a frat and has three beautiful children. And yeah, I'm really excited to get into this conversation with her. There's so much to talk to you about. I also just want to say that, we met I, never even remember. We met 13 years ago, I think. It's been over 10 summers since I, let camp
When you
pass.
have to name the number, it's always a little shocking. I this week bumped into a friend in a frat, and we were co-counselors in HASC in 1999. Do the
Wow.
math.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So, but we met 13 years ago. Even though we both are from West Orange. And we both lived in West Orange for a nice amount of time. So, okay. So I want to begin with, can you tell me, a bit about your upbringing? As we just said, you grew up in West Orange. I don't know if you always lived in West Orange, but if you can share where you grew up, what your childhood was like, let's get into that.
Sure. I'm very, very grateful to my parents that I feel like I had a really strong um, childhood, strong, stable home. We grew up what would you would call in America modern Orthodox. I grew up in Edison, Highland Park. My parents moved to West Orange once I was an adult, and I
Oh,
lived
I
there
didn't
for a
know
little bit.
that.
Yeah, yeah. But thank God I have two older brothers. I'm the youngest and only girl. And my parents were very hardworking, devoted community members. And yeah, we just grew up with strong Torah values, strong community values, Jewish education values. My mother worked in Jewish education her entire career
Oh,
as a
wow. Where
teacher
she
and then a
work?
principal. She was a principal for most of the career that I remember as a kid. The largest amount of time for Shalom Torah Centers, which is a network of schools in southern New Jersey. And then as I was older, she was between a couple different schools in Brooklyn, Muncie, different areas,
Very
um,
nice.
which was a general studies principal. And those were always strong values in our home, very close to our grandparents, thank God. And yeah, I would say pretty normal, which like I said, I'm very grateful for. As you get older, you learn that, not to take those things for granted.
100%.
My mother's Choser B'tshuva from when she was a teenager, and my parents met in the YU system, so they're very, um, supportive of that and sending me and my brothers through YU and Stern, and as a family, very involved in NCSY, the youth group or the OU youth group. And
Nice.
that was like my entire social world was NCSY. I would say from seventh through
Wow.
12th grade. My friends from school, from I went to Berea from high school and from NCSY. I was actually in JEC from 5th grade. I was in the
Wow.
local school, and for a variety of reasons, let's say, my parents decided to stop sending me to the local school, and I started going on the bus to Elizabeth in 5th grade, and then I was there through high school.
It's so interesting. I feel like so few people um start JC from 5th grade.
Yeah, yeah. I had one other friend from Edison that we traveled together. We did it together, but from that age, most of my friends were from Elizabeth, and also one of my closest friends today. She lives in Efrat, also friends from 5th grade. We were in
Wow.
school together through high school, including college and graduate school. So we spent a lot of time together.
Do you feel like your childhood friends are still like your best friends today?
Um, there are some that I'm very close with. I have a very, very close friend from high school in Teaneck who has been such a good friend since, I mean, she's always been a good friend, but since the war started, I get regular checking in text messages from her. And we've really stayed very close over the years. And she flew in for my wedding here. And Shira and the other friend I mentioned at Efrat, I would say, a handful. Perhaps compared to other people, that's a lot,
Yeah,
considering I'm
yeah.
44 years old and to maintain
Yeah.
those friendships from when I was 14, 15.
Yeah.
really is a big deal. So I am
Yeah.
very grateful for that.
I
Yeah.
only have, like, one childhood friend, and that childhood friend was innate. Like, my mom and her mom have been best friends since, like, 8th grade, so that was basically like a cousin, but I don't really have
Nice.
any, like, childhood friends, so I
Right.
always think it's so nice when people have childhood friends. Like, my mom is still best friends with her childhood friends, and that it's, like, literally 50 years that they've been best friends
It's
for, and it's
incredible. Yeah.
it's crazy, and, like, they come in for, my siblings' wedding. I mean, we got married in America, but they came in for my siblings' weddings, and, like, it's literally family.
Really
So,
special.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really, really nice. So, okay, so your childhood was pretty, like, typical, but then you went to MMY for seminary?
That's right. Yeah. It
Okay.
was the
But
second year of the school. That's another thing
oh,
that ages me.
wow.
It was the second year of MMY. One of my older brothers had gone to bashert for yeshiva. So my parents were already very satisfied and impressed with their leadership and the some of the teachers there. So they were fans of it. I had slight preferences to go elsewhere, but they,
Oh, wow.
said, "You're 17 years old. You don't really know what's best for you." And I'm grateful for their
Where did you
parenting.
wanna go?
Um, it was this is gonna be hard to believe, but my decision then was between MMY and Dar Chibina. Dar Chibina
Oh,
was in
wow.
its 3rd year, I think, and they actually had a lot more in common than they do today, the 2 schools. They were both new, both small, both very rigorous, which I think they both still are. And yeah, so I really wanted to go Dar Chibina, but my parents said,
Wow.
"You're going to MMY." So that's what parents are for.
I feel like, MMY and Mivaseret aren't even so similar anymore.
Correct.
But did I make up that you worked in MMY for a bit?
I did, I was a assistentit in their night seder.
Nice. Okay. So you went to Stern, and then you went to graduate school at, like,
Yeah.
Azrieli?
No, I decided I wanted to study special education.
Okay.
So I actually finished Stern in, January of the year, and then what I attribute as an extremely, extremely formative experience was then I went to Israel for the 2nd semester. Formative because I think it was the first time in my life, which says something for growing up in, like, a very typical, somewhat sheltered life. It was the first time in my life that I made a plan, like a life plan that was completely not based on anything social. I got on a plane, I found myself a job as a madricha in seminary where I didn't know anyone
Which seminary?
in Midrashet Moriah,
Okay, very nice.
and, I didn't know anybody there, I didn't know who I'd be working with, and, said, "I'm just going." I had no plans, I didn't know what I was
Yeah.
gonna do, and for me, at that stage, this was novel. This was a big deal.
Right.
And, it was wonderful. It was just wonderful. I matured tremendously. It was a difficult year in Israel. Like I said before, we're finding ourselves every couple of years with different reasons, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was the beginning of the second Intifada. It was yeah, it was a difficult time. Um, and, we had to keep the girls in the dorm at nights, every night, and, but I, made some really special, long, like, lifelong friendships there as well, with some of the students in the school. I went back to MMY during the day and learned at MMY with the Shanabet students.
Nice.
Um, and yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful semester. And then the following year, I started graduate school back in New York for special education in Hunter College, and that was another, like, 2.5 years in New York. And at every crossroads, I would always check in with myself. I remember this. Also check in this was pre-Nefesh B'Nefesh. There was an organization called Tehillah, which was about, supporting Aliyah. People wanted to make Aliyah. So I would always check in with them on email, like, when's the best time to go? Before graduate school, after graduate school. Then I finished graduate school. Said, should I come now? And then I think I said I wanted to get a little bit of work under my belt. So I worked for another year. But when I finished graduate school, I kind of, because graduate school and education, you're only in classes from the afternoon to the evenings because they want you working during the day to have the hands-on experience. And here I was going to Hunter 2 or 3 nights a week from living in Washington Heights. And then I finished. I was like, what am I going to do every day after 3 o'clock? So I quickly took my GREs and signed up for Azrieli doctoral program. And I
Cool.
did 1 year of classes there. And then after that year, I said, okay, Higi Azman, I've lived in what I considered always gray Washington Heights. I know the sun came out sometimes, but to me, it felt very gray a lot. And I've done my time here. I've dated enough here. It's enough dating saying I want to marry someone who's going to live in Israel. Um, let's go. So I
Wow.
came for a year trial. I wasn't ready to say. I had a lot of, I would say, anxious feeling about committing to making Aliyah. What if it doesn't work? I have to come back. Anyway, so I said I'll go for a year. That first year, again, I didn't want to dive into my career yet. I wanted something very light, very non-committal. I did my practicum. You had to do like a small internship, like a few hours a week for my Israeli program. So I did that in a small boys yeshiva program for boys with special needs. And while I was there, the yeshiva that it was hosted in, their secretary left. So I became
Mm.
a single 25-year-old secretary in a boys yeshiva where the Rosh Yeshiva was my former Rosh Yeshiva in MMY, and he said to
Oh,
me, "This would
wow.
never happen under any other circumstance. I know you, and this is." So that was it.
Wait, was that
It
your
saved me. It
birth
was
on?
great. No, it was Rabbi David in Torah Traga.
Ah, Rabbi Abishai David. Very
He was the Rosh
nice.
Yeshiva in MMY when I was in MMY. So
Wow. Very
yeah,
nice. I didn't even know that he worked at MMY.
yeah.
Maybe I'm
You're young.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that
cool.
was my
Wow.
first year in Israel, and thank God
Well, can we go
it
back for a
captured me.
second?
Yeah, totally. I'm jumping
Um,
ahead. Yeah.
yeah, because you basically like kind of skipped over the fact that you were in Israel during the Second Intifada.
Yeah. It was one semester. It wasn't you know what? My primary responsibility in that semester, my primary focus was for the students in the seminary that I was working in. And there were a number of terrifying stories, terrifying incidents where we had to, head count, find out where everybody was, and when there were bombs going off in downtown Yerushalayim. Um,
Did anything ever happen to any of your students?
Thank God, no. There was one Saturday night, I don't know, this was a sort of famous story where there was a double bomb on Ben Yehuda. Like one went off and then everybody ran, and then where they ran to, another one went off. And I happened to be in town that night, and everyone was just running. You just saw crowds and crowds of people running, and me and two other students, we found like a minibus. It was just a minibus sitting there with the driver inside. So, and I'm
Wow.
on the phone, answering phone calls, girls, where are you? Get back. Da, da. They said, oh, there's 10 of us on the corner here. So we said the minibus, we'll pay you whatever it is. Come. We basically drove around collecting students. There were like 20 of us squeezed into this minibus, got back to the dorm. It was hectic. It was stressful,
And
but
also at that
mhm.
point, like Midrash Moria, right? Weren't you in Shari Tzedek?
Yeah, it was in Shari Tzedek. So there were, I mean, that have distinct memories of sirens, sirens, sirens all the time. Also that year, there was a very famous, unfortunate tragedy of the Versailles wedding hall in Talpiot that collapsed. I don't know if you ever
What
heard about this,
happened?
but there was a wedding in a Talpiot wedding hall, and the floor on the second floor collapsed in the middle of the dancing. And it was, I mean, on the level of another enormous terror attack. Unfortunately, it was human error, and those people were later brought to court and whatnot. But it was very, very unfortunate. I mean, I don't remember
Mm.
so many details of it, but I remember that night and the volume of sirens nonstop and the emergency blood drive sending girls to Magen David Adom to donate blood. Because if there were to be a terror attack at the same time that night, the blood banks would be empty. It was just crazy. It was a
Wow.
crazy time. But now that I'm older and more experienced, I see that, we live through a lot of crazy times, and we dig deep into, our skills of emunah and our skills of our, whatever mantras you have that get you through these times. And I mean, even just to talk about that semester in my mind, it's like, oh, it was just the semester. I've thank God lived in Israel for 18 years, 19 years since then.
And you were there after Sabaros or before Sabaros?
So um that was before Sparrows. Sparrows was the following summer.
Because I
Um
feel like that's the one that, like, when you think of, like, the Second Intifada, and maybe that's just me, I don't know if it's just me or, like, everyone has this, but, like, that's, like, the crux of, like, the Second
yeah.
Intifada for me, like, the
Yeah,
Sbarro attack,
definitely.
And so much so to the point that, like, I went to school with a lot of Israeli kids. I went to Schechter until 7th grade, and they all spoke about it, and, like, we were like, "What is that?" Like, we had no idea, but, like, I do
Yeah.
remember them speaking about Sbarro.
The following summer, I was a madrika on Jolt, one of the NCSY summer programs, and you don't really have time for like a day off. But I remember I got like an afternoon off while the group was on Har Herzl, and I got on a bus and I went straight downtown to Sparrow because I wanted to be there. I wanted to stay to Hillim. I wanted to, and I went and it was all boarded up. It was like it was so fresh. It was like a week or two after, and this is the summer after I was in Midrashet. And I went back and I was sharing that story with some of the participants on Jolt. And the head of the like Israeli staff that was with us, the head of the security, looked at me and said, "How dare you go there? You know, you're representing our group. And if God forbid something were to happen to you, what would happen to all of the tourism and this and that?" And I understand where he was coming from, but I happen to disagree with him vehemently. But I understand he's, looking out for the safety of all the participants of his group, and that's what's
For
important to
sure.
him. But
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So that was
So,
that time
it
period. Yeah.
I don't wanna skip your whole story, and we're definitely gonna go back to it. Um, but, I do know that today you live on a hilltop in the middle of nowhere. I mean, the middle of the beautiful country, that we live in,
Yes, yes,
and
yes,
it's an
absolutely.
incredible place, but you also live in the middle of literally nowhere. Um, so can we I wanna talk about this a little bit now because I feel like it's really, for anyone else, and maybe I'm totally off, but I feel like for anyone else, it would be so scary to live on a hilltop in the middle of nowhere in Israel and, like, literally the Yehuda V'Shomron, and, like, how did you guys end up there? What brought you guys there? And
Sure.
what is life like on the hilltop?
You say, how can people do it? What would we do? We have people come and visit us all the time. Thank God, my house, my door is a revolving door. And there's a
We
couple
need to
questions that are always
come.
everyone's totally welcome.
Yeah.
Come. There's a couple questions that are everyone's first questions. Where do you go grocery shopping? Don't you get lonely? And often when couples come, it's the man that looks around, looks at the views and everything. This is my dream. I want to build a house on the mountain. And the woman is like, you go fulfill your dream on your
It's so
time,
funny
not my
because
thing.
I feel like Gideon and I would be the opposite. That, like, I'd be like, "Let's go!" And he'd be like, "Smart, we're literally going to the middle of nowhere on the hilltop in a very scary place. Like, what are you talking about?" But, yeah, that's just
So I'll
Gideon and
give you a
I.
little context on where we are, and then I'll answer those questions about how we got there. So we are in Gush Etzion. We're on the most southeastern tip of Gush Etzion, or what some people would call Yehuda, like when the separation of the Shvatim, or people say Yehuda and Shomron. So we're the farthest Jews in Yehuda, our mountain. Um, we are in between a couple other yeshuvim, like called Ibe Hanacha, Male Amos. But the most recognizable, closest location, like you said, is Efrat, which is a 15-minute drive.
Yeah.
And it's on a good day, 35 minutes to Yerushalayim. So on the one hand, when you come here and you see the views and you see everything, it feels like you're in the middle of the Golan and like remote and out there. On the other hand, thank God it is very accessible to places. That's like the practical answer.
Yeah.
How we got here. So I stepped into this in marriage. Ari was already living out here. In fact, when we were dating, he was the only person living out here. He was one of four partners that founded the place. It was a deed for a piece of land that was already state land that was designated for agriculture and tourism. And these four partners, including Ari and his partner Jeremy, who he's been working with for 20 years on a variety of projects, they joined the partnership. So they're 2 out of 4 partners. And they said, we want to do this. They did a ton of fundraising, put their own money, every last shekel they had, into getting electricity, water, paving a road. And they built a tiny little one-room house, and Ari moved to the house. So he was the only human living for 2 kilometers uh, in any
Do you not
direction.
think that that was crazy? Like, when you met him, you're just not just like,
I
"What the
I that
heck?"
was why I that was th to me, that was, like, not why I went out with him, but that was symbolic
Wow.
of the passion and the
Amazing.
youthfulness and devotion that I was looking for in a partner, and at
Wow.
37, which is how old we both were when we dated
You
for
guys
the
were the
second
same
time, but that's
you guys are
another
the same
story.
age.
We're the same age, yeah. He's 3 weeks older than me.
Wow.
So, yeah, so at 37, I was dating, thank God, a decent amount, but not finding that excitement and excitement for Avodas Hashem, excitement
Yeah.
for living in Eretz Israel, excitement for life. And
Um,
when I was called and told about him, and like he's like living on a mountain by himself, his closest neighbors are 2 kilometers away. I was like, tell me more. That sounds cool, you know?
wow.
Our third date was out here, and I got to see, and that was important to him because he said, this is a deal breaker. Like, I'm living here. I'm not going anywhere. Um,
That's incredible of
so
him.
yeah, so I married into it. That's how I ended up here. At the beginning of the war, we didn't have any army presence, and we were putting together literally like Google Sheets of volunteers, rotations of Ari, Jeremy, and their friends that would come throughout the night just to be here. Because the fear was at the beginning that we're surrounded by there's Kisan, one Arab village on one side, Rushaida is a Bedouin village on the other side. The other side is Arugot, Nahal Arugot, the
Beautiful.
stream. Arugot stream is my house sits on the Nahal. But across the Nahal is, a little bit that way. Right before Hebron is Sa'ir, which is like known to be one of the more violent Arab towns. So they were just nervous at the beginning of the war that October 7th would kind of inspire others to, do similar
Yeah,
things.
yeah, for
So
sure.
at the beginning, the vigilance was very, very high. It's still high, but probably, I mean, like everything we get used to and has calmed down a little bit.
Wow. Wow. Like, do you ever get scared of raising your kids in that location?
Not at all. I think the benefits are so great that I really don't even think about the fear.
So, what are some of the benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I'm raising my children in nature. I think that is so wonderful. Like, my daughter, she goes outside in shoes, and then the first thing she does before she starts to play anywhere is takes off her shoes. Like, why do I buy her shoes?
I feel like that's very Israeli, though.
Yeah, so she's like in the dirt, they name the different bugs and roaches and millipedes that they see outside, like they all have names. I'm like, oh, there
Cute.
he is again, or that's his brother. And um, we have a pool here. We have hiking paths. We have natural ma'ayanot. We have, I mean, to
Wow.
raise them in nature. That's one piece of it. The other pieces are the values. I mean, to raise them in a place where, like I said, we're connected to Ida Nahal. She's in Gan there. So we're not really hitting like the big kid, big problem stuff yet. But even at 4 years old, the values are at such a high level and so refined. She just had her Misibat Siyum last week from
Wait,
Gan.
so where is she in Ghana?
She's in got 4-year-old Gan in Iban Achal, the yishuv next to us.
Okay.
It's like a 3-minute drive, a 20-minute walk. So they had the Misibat Siyum. And the whole first 20 minutes were tefillot for the fathers of the children in the Gan themselves. 85% of the yishuv were miguyas, were in miluim for the first 4 months of the war. So
Wow.
85%, that's a crazy, crazy amount. It's not common. It's a very, very young yishuv. And so these are the children in the Gan singing, the Mishaberach for the Chayalim for their fathers, many of whom were not even at the Misibah because they are continue to be in Miluim now.
Wow.
And they're saying Tehillim, and I mean, obviously in a time of war, you see the values much more on the surface, but I just feel like I'm not dealing, at least in this kufa in my life right now, with the TikTok and the whatever, you can name a
For
thousand other
sure.
things. Like she is excited beyond belief about making lemonade that she can sell in the Gan Shashuim in the playground tomorrow. Like, she tells
And
stories about because we named him Mordechai Shimshon. So like her favorite bedtime stories are stories from Tanakh about Shimshon
you live
HaGibor, about and I think a lot of that as parents, people decide that they want to set those values for their home. But if it's reinforced by the environment, by that the talk about around us is being shomer in Eretz Yisrael, and that's why we choose to live in this kind of place, and that she goes to gone in a community that supports those values. I think that's just tremendous, and very, very grateful for that.
What is Shabbos like in your community? Like, is there a minyan on
Community is very
Shabbat?
generous. Um,
Like, is there, like, a minyan on Shabbat? Like, where do people daven? Like, I know there's a shul by you that somebody
right.
built.
We have a
Yeah,
beautiful, beautiful big Knesset. I wish I could do like a slideshow. Maybe I'll send you pictures after. But we have a beautiful big Knesset right next to my house that was built in the style. People say, "Oh, it looks like a mosque," and we say, "No, Bate Knesset were built like that way before mosques were built."
for sure.
But it's all stone dome building, and it's a very, very special building. My son Shiloh was the first to have his brit. Since subsequently many have had bar mitzvahs and hanachat tefillin and britot there. It's a very special building. So for the first, I'd say 4 years or so, there was not much activity on Shabbatot. It was very quiet. We like to invite friends and company, so to liven it up a bit, but minyanim were not regular. Then about 2 years ago, we had a Sefer Torah donated to the farm by wonderful, wonderful people. And since
When you say
then,
farm, sorry, I just wanna
Mm,
ask, when you say farm, are there, like, chickens and cows on this
okay.
farm? Or are
I can
there,
go
like
on that route now. Yeah, so it's technically we're called Chavat Arugot, the Arugot Farm. It's also Khan Arugot. Khan is like a guest house. So that goes back. So the last 2 years, the tourism here has really, really just shot through the roof. And we
wow,
have on the grounds here, there are zimmers and villas that get rented out every single Shabbat. So I would say for the last 2 years, I could count on one hand maybe how many Shabbatot we didn't have a minyan because we have a Torah now and we have so many people coming. Like families like to rent a zimmer, a villa, something for a big, grandparents' anniversary or what's that?
do you set up the villa, like, for them? Is that part
No,
of what
each piece is like private. Like we personally own what Zimmer. So we do that and we rent that out, or we
Mhm.
have our friends stay in it for, as our guests. Our
Wow.
house is modest and we thank God fill up most of it. So we have a small guest area on our house, but really if we have more guests, they'll go to the Zimmer. So yeah, thank God. Like I said, my door is revolving. I could have written volumes by now of the stories of the people walking in and sharing their life stories with us and talking about how their visit here has moved them and changed them, vice versa. I mean, the stories we hear from them and how that's impacted on us and the sacrifices people make. It's not like, in my grandparents' generation, but the sacrifices still people make to come to Eretz Yisrael, to support Yudan Shomron. It's really incredible in terms of the farm element. So I said before, the land is approved for agriculture and tourism. So we built our house. We don't own it. It's not a property, a neches, as they say.
Oh,
We can
wow.
never sell it.
Great.
We don't own a home. we
Wow.
and thank God it's beautiful and we love our home, but it's considered part of the property of the tourism in the place here. So a farm. So we personally have a chicken coop in the back. We have about 20 chickens.
Cool.
And that's another
Wow.
thing my kids love doing, going out, feeding the chickens, collecting the eggs, all that stuff.
Sure.
Another whole area growing up in Edison, New Jersey, I never thought I'd have to learn about. And I'm Googling all the time, like different questions about raising chickens and
Like, do you
all that
guys
stuff.
maybe this is a I hope this is an okay question, but do you guys, like, do like, shechita there or, like
Oh, we have with sheep and goat.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
We've done sheep and goat, from the herd we had here. It happens to be at the beginning of the war, we sent our herd to a different farm because we used to have for years, like, a steady flow of, they call Noar Gvaot, like the Hilltop youth, that would come and volunteer here as the shepherds and caretakers of the animals. But since the war, it's been very, kind of unpredictable, so we combined our herd with a nearby farm, and we don't have those animals here anymore, but we used to have about 60, 70 sheep and goats. We've had
Yeah.
geese, we've had camels, we've had donkeys, horses, we have horses. Um, but the
Incredible.
chickens are the only ones that are our personal animals. The rest are either other families here, personal animals, or the farms.
Wow.
And
I
in terms of agriculture, we have thousands of fruit trees planted, most of them olives, with a whole olive grove, and then a couple other thousand variety of fruit trees.
in terms of, like, mikvah, like, have you ever gone into, like, do you go to the mikvah, like, in your Mayanot? Like, is that something that what the women do by you, or, like, eh
Thank God and now they're building homes in Ibeanahal, but until 2 years ago, like the first 4 years I was here, the only permanent building, like non-caravan in Ibeanahal is the mikveh. They have a beautiful mikveh there. So thank God. Thank God for that. Because I'm not such a fan of doing the Mayan thing. I mean, it's a cool experience, but
like, have you ever done it?
um no,
Oh, wow.
no, yeah.
Wow. It's so interesting. I feel like if I lived there, man, I just probably, like, that would be
Take advantage of it.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never
Wow.
no.
So, okay, so let's go back to your childhood. Um,
Sure.
you know, slash kind of go back to it. If you told your 18-year-old self that you'd be in this spot today, that you'd have 3 kids, married to a husband, living in the middle of Yehuda. Okay, so if you were to tell your 18-year-old self that this was going to be your life, what would you say?
So it's interesting because my 18-year-old self, I'd be like, "Oh, awesome." Um, I wouldn't be in as much disbelief, I think. I think I sort of like look back on my life. This is kind of taking a step back in order to answer the question. I
Yeah.
look back on my life as very distinct, like separate chapters, which obviously aren't really that separate.
Yeah.
But, like my childhood growing up in New Jersey, my single life before I made Aliyah, which was a shorter period, but my single life in Israel, which was 12, 13 years living in Yerushalayim, and now my married life here. And, I mean, just last week, something came up. Ari mentioned a friend of his name, and one of his best friends. And I was like, I've never heard that person's name before. And he's like, we're 6 years married and you're like, still don't know like my whole life before. I'm like, how am I going to know your whole life before? Like we got married at
Wow.
38 years old. Like there's so much rich history, social, spiritual, everything like growth. And so like I'm saying, like I look at these like different time periods. So yeah, so when I was 18, thinking about this life now, I'd be like, wow, that's amazing. That's exactly what I want. That's perfect. Like bring it. But I think if you would say more to, and this dives into like the single thing, say more to like 35-year-olds, Shayna, like in 3 years, in 6 years, in 8 years, like this is where you're gonna be. I think I would just be in like disbelief.
Wow. It's actually interesting. I have a friend who got married at 32, I believe. And she told me the year before she met her husband, that Yom Kippur, she's like, I didn't even daven for myself. I just davened for other people because I just didn't believe I'd ever get married. And now, Baruch Hashem, she's not even 40 yet, and she has 4 beautiful kids.
It's
And it's
incredible.
always,
And I want to like clarify, I don't think I ever lost hope. Like I was always davening and always wanting, but I would say to Hashem, like, if it's not meant to be, then like, just let me be okay. Meaning I always, and people, I remember speaking to married friends and they'd not criticize, but they would be like, no, don't talk that way. Like, I said, no, I'm not resigning. Like, I'm not saying like it's not going to happen. I'm just saying if it doesn't happen, that is a possibility. I want to know that, to daven that I'll be okay. So just to answer the question, to look back, I would say like 18-year-olds, she'd be like, amazing, like live on a mountain. I mean, and that was like my height of like, post seminary, want to make Aliyah. That's so awesome. But then as my life got older and more experienced and more nuanced and challenges along the way, and then even at the beginning of marriage, which we didn't talk yet about, also with
yeah,
fertility, and to say that before we're married 6 years, I'd have 3 children. And like I'm humbled to talk about fertility with people who I know struggle, and to say that I had my fertility journey is true, but I'm just floored. And like I said at the beginning of the conversation, like I don't think we were recording yet then, but no, Ari and I feel very, very strongly that we have a mitzvah, we have a tzibui, we have a obligation of Pirsume Nisa,
wow.
to spread the nisim that we know has come to us and we've been blessed with. And that's what we try to do all the time. I try to do, and one of my intentions in speaking to you is to do that.
Thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode of Anything But Traditional. I'm really happy to have Shaena Cantor Abramowitz on to share her story of living on the hilltop, becoming a mother, becoming a wife, and she really went through the ringer. I really am inspired by Shaena in so many different ways, and I'm so grateful to know her. I do want to say that this episode is a little bit different, as I'm sure maybe you could tell. First of all, it was recorded a while ago, so I'm trying to keep things up to date, but if any of you guys have gotten confused, that's why. This episode, because she lives on the hilltop and internet issues and all that, this interview was filmed in a few different segments. So the audio is a little bit different in places and the picture is a little bit different in places. So I really appreciate you guys listening and you guys staying here. And it's an incredible episode, but I know that there's some glitches that are not in most episodes. I also obviously want to remind you that there are ad opportunities and sponsorship opportunities, and also to like and subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And make sure to leave a review, rate, give it up 5 stars. And I'm so happy that you are here today. So now back to this episode.
Basically, before we were even married, I went to my doctor and I said, I know that it could be that we're lining ourselves up for a lot of challenges. What can I do? I want to make sure that we're starting on the right foot. And she said, generally we recommend, people try naturally for about a year and then we'll start with different, processes. And she's like, for you, just wait a couple months.
I have
And
2
then,
questions.
sure.
Okay, my first question is, why did you think you'd have issues?
We were older, 38 years old. Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Like I just wanted to make sure that I was doing whatever I can. It's sort of my attitude I try to be like an organized person, have my sort of like ducks in a row, however much control we have over such a thing.
Yeah.
That's to say. But to put everything in order as much as we can. So I figured, okay, let's just have that conversation before.
Normally, I know that for a lot of people that are over 35, they say try for like 6 months and then, so they didn't say 6 months. They said like shorter, but like
Yeah,
a year.
I don't think she gave me an exact number.
Okay.
She was like, get married, because this is like when we were engaged. She's like, get married, settle in, wait a couple months, and come back to me.
Okay.
So, she's a wonderful doctor. I was
Nice.
very, very, yeah.
Do you want to
great
give
things
her
to
a
say
shout
about
out?
Dr. Reina Nobolsi.
Oh, I've heard about her.
Yeah. I don't think she works in the system anymore, but in the time that we were able to have her services, she was great.
Amazing.
Anyway, so we did that. And then, as those who know the lingo know, so they start you off with, do tests and check that everything is beseder gamur, and then start off with IUI. So we did, she said classically they'll have you do 2 or 3 rounds of IUI. And then if that doesn't work, start with IVF. So I want to get the details right. If I remember, we did 1 round of IUI and it did not work, which was not surprising because she sort of prepared us like, this is just what you got to go through, the steps you got to go through,
Do I know?
But I had also frozen eggs when I was single. I think it was my 35th or 36th birthday. I think it was 35. It's just a nice round number. So I was a little bit familiar with the process. And the doctor was encouraging that, like, so many women do this and we don't even have what she kept saying was, we don't even have the statistics to show if it's viable or not, because women don't end up using their eggs from when they were single, because thank God so many are successful and whatever. So that was like, those
Wow.
were her encouraging words. Like, we don't even have the statistics to show whether it works well enough or not. Like enough statistics, I would say, or valid statistics. Anyways, so I don't remember the exact reason why, but she said after 1 IUI, she said, let's try for 1 retrieval.
Meaning an IVF retrieval?
Yeah, an IVF retrieval. I'm trying to remember
Wait,
what.
but or transfer with those eggs, or
No, nothing to do with the single eggs. I was just mentioning that as like she would
oh
keep saying, like, to be encouraging, like, well, because I had good numbers. I don't remember what they were, but from my retrieval when I was single, they were good. Again, these are all very relative terms. Like I said, journey is a relative
yeah.
term. But anyway, so she said, let's do one retrieval. And we did the retrieval, and generally in IVF, when you're wanting and ready to get pregnant, they would do the transfer or try to do the transfer immediately. But I had a very bad reaction to the hormones, and my ovaries were overreacted, let's say. I was sick for a couple of weeks, and it was an unhealthy environment to transfer the embryos into. So we had to freeze everything.
That happens a lot, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's disappointing, but there's again
Yeah.
levels of disappointment that one can face. So I was like, okay, not
Yeah.
meant to be this month. And then by the time the next cycle came around, when I think it was already a couple months because I had to recover and time passes.
No, I totally wasn't invalidating how annoying it was. I was just saying, like,
Yeah.
I think that, for the, like, listeners, I think it's very common, and I want people to know that if your body does that, which my body would almost never do that because growing any follicles is a big deal for me, but, I mean, Baruch Hashem, we grow much more than we think, but I want people to know that it's not, if your body does that, it's normal, and
Right.
it's not crazy.
Right. Right. And one should know, I say this a lot with people making Aliyah. Like, you make Aliyah and then you think your first trip to the bank, you're so excited, you're opening up your bank account. Your first trip to the Kupat Cholim, you're opening up I said, no, your first trip anywhere is your pilot trip to that place. Do not expect to get what your expectation is to get done at that place on that day to come home with that. So the same thing, you go in with expectations, IVF, transfer, whatever. No, not that time. But thank God they were able to retrieve and they froze. So then her attitude was like, listen, you already have these embryos frozen, sort of a insurance policy over there, as much as that's insurance. But
Wait, that we're talking about eggs from before or the
no,
embryo?
no. These were from that
Oh, okay.
retrieval. The retrieval where I had the reaction, but they
Yeah.
couldn't do the transfer, so they froze everything. She said, you already have that. Let's do another IUI. Now, this was sort of a morning of what's that series? That series of that like Fate is a children's book series that's like really
Series
popular.
of misfortunate events?
Yes, thank you. That was this morning that we had to go do the IUI. As anyone who's done IUI knows, it's like not a fun morning you're like rushing, you're holding a bag and you're like, where do I go? And we went to the place we were supposed to go. I think it was to Bikur Cholim Hospital. And there's a sign on the door, we're all in a training today. We're closed. And I called, of course, because you're like just I'm gonna keep saying I'm emotionally just high strung. I called the Maccabi office, hysterical, from Bikur Cholim. What am I supposed to do? They're closed. Why didn't anyone tell me? You knew I was coming today. They're like, relax, get in a taxi, go to Hadassah. So we went to Hadassah Har Sofim. In the meantime, you are on the clock. So I'm like running to Har Sofim, running from one office to the next, to the next. In the meantime, my husband was with me, but he was sick. And so like just, I don't know, flu-ish, whatever, I don't know. Pre-corona, don't worry, everybody. If anyone's listening, you're going to the hospital, blah, blah, blah. This was before that. And he's running around with me and we're just sitting in the hospital and he's like, I really need to go home. Like he had like fever and was like, and what's my reaction? The high strung girl. I'm like,
You're not going home.
leave me here with this bag. And he left. And I'm literally like this basket case, self-pitying person sitting in the hospital, not knowing which office I'm supposed to go to next, waiting in the women's clinic. I go to pick up whatever, the sample. Anyway, finally I go in and it's just like not very, maybe some places have like more warm, supportive IUI environments. On that day at this moment, and maybe Harat Sofim is, at that day on this moment, it was not. And I go into the office, they do the procedure. I'm literally crying to the doctor and the nurse, having nothing to do with pain or anything, just the whole day, how I got there. And they're telling me, no, it's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. And I'm like, you don't even know why I'm crying. And as my husband likes to say, it's often the scenarios where we go through the most challenges and our heartstrings are pulled for one reason or the other in the hardest of directions that the bracha comes out of. And thank God, my oldest daughter
Wow.
was born from that IUI. I could probably go on the list of the few people for whom IUI has actually worked. Baruch Hashem. And yeah, so she was born in the end of February 2020, which is actually 2 weeks before the first Corona lockdown. We were walking out of the Hadassah in Karim with her, going home. And as people who know Hadassah, you have to, the old Hadassah structure, you have to walk through the mall to leave. And my husband, I don't know why, because nothing had happened yet corona wise in Israel. He had a surgical mask in his pocket and he puts it on her mouth in the Duna. I said, "What are you doing? You don't put masks on babies." He goes, "You haven't been reading the news. Don't worry." And I was like, "Okay, you're being a little crazy." Little did we know 2 weeks later, I wouldn't be leaving the house. So that maternity leave was a bit different than most other people's maternity leaves. Nobody was leaving the house. So it was quite a journey.
Wow. Were
Um,
people able to meet her, like, in those 2 weeks?
in those 2 weeks, I mean, I didn't really go anywhere for the 2 weeks anyway, but then we went to a Purim suit. We actually went to 2 Purim Sudas. That was the Purim that kind
Yep.
of everything spread. So we went to 2 different Purim Sudas. I wasn't really in my right mind anyway. I suffered that pregnancy a lot with postpartum anxiety.
Okay.
In fact, one of the Purim Sudas I went to, friends in Jerusalem, a friend that was there texted me afterwards with that text message that a close friend can send to say, like, "You really didn't seem like yourself. If you need help, I can direct you, send you in the right direction." And
Oy.
so that was quite a journey on top of Corona shutdowns. And I mean, not on top of, clearly everything was contributing to my,
Yeah,
my mental state at that point. But,
for sure.
um,
So, but you
yep.
you named her Dvash, right?
Yes, her name is Dvash Esther. My grandmother, who's really like the matriarch of my family, she is a Holocaust survivor from Poland. Very, very close with her. I was close with her my whole life. Probably she's guilty of putting the most pressure on me in terms of getting married. Well, Shaena, when am I going to see you married? I need to be alive for your wedding. Thanks, Bubby. That's going to help. That's going to make things happen faster.
Was she alive
But
for her wedding?
she was at 96 years old.
Wow.
And at 95 or 96, she flew to Israel for my wedding. And she lived for another, I want to say, year and a bit afterwards.
Wow.
And she actually got to see, I have a first cousin who was just a few months older than me, who was also single and got married the following year. So she got to be at her wedding in the States. And then she passed away 4 months before Dvash was born.
Wow.
And her name was Esther Ziesel. And Ziesel in Yiddish means sweet. So we
Oh.
named Dvash Esther after
Do you
Bubby.
know anyone else named Dvash, though?
I did not. Ari, my husband, knew of one person. It was new for us, and thank God she is Kishma Kenhi. She is like her name.
Aw. Also, like, Shvat, like, is like, like, Tu B'Shvat.
Teva, nature, trees. Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank God.
And so you guys, it was like less than 2 years from the time that you guys got married.
Yeah, we were married in August. Yes, it was less than 2 years. We were married in August 2018, and she was born February 2020.
Wow.
Um, Now, I definitely needed time after her birth to recover.
You were like
Like I said,
40.
yeah, she was born when I was 40.
Wow.
Another word of support for anyone um, entering pregnancy, quote unquote, later in life in this country is after 35, they call you geriatric. So one should not take offense to that. Geriatric pregnancy doesn't mean anything.
For
It's just a
sure.
medical category. And yeah,
Yeah,
all
no,
of
but
my
it's
pregnancies were geriatric pregnancies.
wait, so question for you though. I think about it a lot as I get older. Gideon and I met 10 years ago. So I never thought I'd be 32 without a child, ever. Um, you know, as somebody that, will probably be, in Mir Hashem, I'll have kids one day. I'll be minimum 33 when the child is born, whatever. Um, how is it being an older? I mean, I know that 33 and 40 is a bit different, but like, how is it being an older parent and like, being older than all your friends and like in terms of like gone and just like being like, oh yeah, this is my like first child, and like everyone else is like 22 and pushing their stroller around, and you're like, okay guys, I like all you pictures that were born in like the 2000s, and I'm here in born in the 80s.
Yeah. We have a lot of funny stories. We have friends, a number of friends who have grandchildren older than our children. A number
Wow.
of friends. Um,
But
or
that are
the same
your
age.
like roughly the same age to you.
Friends of mine, my age, who had children at 21, 22. And so their children now have babies, and some of them are older than my children. Like their grandchildren are older than my children.
Wow, that's
So it's
insane.
just funny. Listen, I have, like I said, a lot of funny stories, a lot of funny conversations. I'm very new to the whole like GAN WhatsApp group culture. And every time there's like a new misiba or something, I have to ask someone like, what do we do? What's my role? What? And they're like, and I'm like, yeah. And I give the whole background. I'm in the park with women who are like, yeah, I'm deciding what I should study because they got married at 20 and had 2 or 3 kids, and now they're going back to school. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. Let me be your career advisor.
But have you made
um,
a lot of friends that are like 20 years younger than you?
not a lot, some just through like what they call the misgaret of sending your child into a system where that's how you meet the people,
Yeah.
those everyone in that age bracket.
Yeah.
We also live the yishuv we live next to is a relatively young yishuv. There aren't that many. Maybe there's 2 or 3 families where the parents are in our age range.
Wow.
It's mostly young families. They
Wow.
don't have a school in the yishuv. They only have a ma'on and a gan, like a daycare and a preschool.
Yeah. So do you have any specific stories that like stand out in terms of being an older parent?
Lots of like funny conversations,
Or like anything crazy that somebody said to you?
No, I mean, thank God, I think what we feel blessed by, and I'm gonna be like so like rosy, but like it's true. Um, like rose-colored glasses. We feel that like parenting at this age, um, on a I don't know if this is true, but we feel like on a biochemical level keeps us young. Like you don't have a choice, you know? So, like pregnancy hormones, like I don't have so many wrinkles, you know?
Baruch Hashem.
No, like literally, like, and also psychologically, like I have friends, close friends that are now at the stage of like their youngest, let's say their oldest are already out of the house for a number
Yeah,
of
yeah.
years, but their youngest now are like in upper elementary school, and they need to like find themselves and recreate themselves and like, who am I? I want to go back into a career. I want to be out of the house. And they're just I mean, I am at a completely different, like, familial structure, developmental stage than most of my peers.
Has it been hard to have relationships with your peers and continue relationships with your peers because of that?
I mean, my timing is limited, my scheduling and stuff like that, but that's the biggest blessing there is. Like, okay, so I'm not going out for coffee so much, and I say to myself all the time, and I say to my friends, like, I had a good 15 to 20 years of like having all that time to myself. And now it's time
But
for,
I'm saying in terms of like
investing
what
otherwise.
you guys talk about or like what you guys are like dealing with, like do you feel like just
No, I feel like I could really gain from a lot of wisdom from people.
amazing?
I complain about not sleeping and everyone's like, we had 10, 15 years of that. You'll have your time. Like, okay,
Nice.
Um, you said, stories, instead of stories, like I think I said this once already also in an earlier meeting, but Ari and I really feel sort of I want to say an obligation, but that sounds like it's a burden. It's not, but an obligation, a positive obligation.
Yeah.
Like my baby, he spoke at the Brit. and he said he actually like got into the details of our fertility journey in at the breed speech, which was, I mean, he asked my permission, but people were like,
Yeah.
"Did you ask your wife about this?" Because we really feel like it's important for people to hear and to see. Like, I have a lot of friends that are still my age and looking for the right person, trying to figure out what Hashem has planned for them. And as much as we can be a story of hope for people still looking for their partner in life, looking to build their families, that's what we want to be. So, yes,
Amazing.
parenting at this age has its challenges. Not 25 anymore, not hopping up off the floor. Like, got to keep going to yoga, Pilates. It's all important. But we really feel like it's Hashem has given us this opportunity to be that symbol for people. So we
Amazing.
try to carry that message a lot.
So let's go on to your second kid.
Okay.
So what was that like? When did you?
So
Yeah.
then, so some time passed. There's a 2 years and 3 months between Vash and my son Shiloh.
Can I ask you, like, I don't know if this is too personal, but when you had postpartum anxiety, what made you decide to be like, what made you feel like, okay, now I'm ready? Like, was there something that was like, okay, now I'm ready to like have the next child, even with a
Yeah,
postpartum?
because for a long time I said, this is not happening. I don't know how anyone in the world has more than one child. And now I look back and it's like I can smile and laugh at it. But at the time, I actually looked around at everyone around me that had more than one child and was like, you are a miracle maker. I don't know how you do that. And to think about my friends that have on average 5, 6, or 7 children, forget about it. Like, but that's the state of mind of someone who's really struggling and suffering, you know?
Yeah, no, for
It's just
sure.
so overwhelming. The feeling of incapability is overwhelming.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I knew I had to give myself time. I had to give myself time to heal. I had to give myself time to just like regulate emotions, regulate my life, get back to a job, like just feel again. And I put this in the context of as much control we have or as competent as we can feel, to feel as competent as I could in the position that I was living where we live, having a little bit of less communal support. Um, like I said, being at work, being a homemaker, being all the things I wanted to be, and then feeling like, okay, I'm up for more.
got it. Yeah, no, for sure.
Um, so I went back to the doctor. We started trying naturally earlier on. I don't remember exactly
Did
when.
you
And
feel like
then,
the pressure though because you were older to be like, okay, I'm gonna have another child, like
yeah, it was an ongoing pressure of like, we don't have time, but
I need the
I
time.
can't do, meaning like
Yeah,
everybody will say when it comes to postpartum issues, when it comes to breastfeeding, anything that causes a woman angst or, you come first.
yeah,
There's no family without the mom. So
100%.
the mom has to be there in her fullest possible strength in
Yeah,
order for anything, to happen. So even though, yes, we definitely felt like clock is ticking, we're 40 years old, 41 by the time, by the time she was, yes, 8, 10 months old, we were already 41. Like, um, so, yeah, so we started again. We went back to the doctor and she suggested, okay, so you have these frozen embryos. Let's start with that. Um, we had one unsuccessful transfer in between, which already, like you said before, why did we go straight to fertility treatments? So I sort of felt validated at that point. Like, okay, so things are not pushed at this age. There was no medical, they call it like unexplained infertility, but
yeah.
um
Age.
and then yeah, and then on the next transfer, I got pregnant with Shiloh.
Wow.
And we joke around because if you follow the story, in some sort of mystical creation order, he was created before Dvash was.
Ah, yeah, yeah,
Obviously, I think we can only really handle like what we see in the world in terms of
yeah.
what's brought down into reality and manifested into reality. So he is my second child, but
Wow.
we joke about it. He has an old soul.
But he won't have to fast on, the day before Pesach.
Right. He doesn't have the obligations of the Bechor, thank God. And Baruch Hashem, he's a very, very sweet boy. He was born on Netzach Shebanetzach, which is the middle day of the Omer,
Oh,
the 25th day of the Omer.
wow.
The week before he was born, the week before my due date, we went to go daven in Shiloh. And we're davening there at the site of the Mishkan, where the Mishkan was. And where Chana davened, Tefillah Chana. And it was a very special day. I knew my due date was the coming week, and they wanted me to be induced because there were just a number of high risk factors. They wanted me to be induced on my due date. The fun part about being induced is you can kind of like, I'm like, wait, my daughter has a doctor's appointment that morning. Okay, we'll take her to the doctor and then we'll go to the hospital, And thank God it was a pretty smooth process. And after he was born, they took me to the recovery area, and I opened my phone and I looked up the day, which was Yud Iyar, and it said it was the yahrzeit of Aliyah Cohen,
Wow.
who served in Kila.
Wow.
So I said, okay. There was Chana davening, right next to me last week. And she promised Hashem that if he gives her that son, he would be in service, Shmuel, who would become to be Shmuel, would be in service to Hashem. And the name Shiloh, the city of Shiloh, actually is also Shai La Hashem, a gift for Hashem,
Wow.
which is what Chana's promise
I
was.
never knew that was what Shiloh meant. Like,
Yeah.
Shaila Hashem. That's beautiful.
It's also another name for Mashiach. It's mentioned a few times, different contexts. And actually, there's also in the Bracha of Yehuda, the Shevet, it says, Lo Yasur Shevet Yehuda, like the scepter will not move from Yehuda, Ad She'avo Shiloh. So that's where we understand that it's a name for Mashiach. But my husband's name is also Ari Yehuda. So you like that idea. There were a lot of things that just fell into place. And like I said, he was born on Netzach Shebanetzach. So he's Shiloh Netzach.
Beautiful.
Very special boy.
Did you have postpartum anxiety after that?
No. So I had already met with my doctor beforehand. I wanted to be more prepared, and thank God I was. And thank God that was a very, very different experience.
Amazing.
I like to say that was my only normal postpartum experience with maternity leave, because you'll see afterwards, my thank God, my third child was born towards the beginning of the war. So
I wasn't even thinking about that.
So that was a different thing also. So we had a Corona baby, a war baby, and Baruch Hashem, Shiloh, I got to enjoy maternity leave a little bit.
And between Shiloh and what's your baby's name again? It's something
Mordechai Shimshon.
Normal.
So
Mordechai
the
Shimshon.
normal name.
So
basically,
but your father-in-law passed away also.
Right, exactly. So my father-in-law, he was a wonderful man, and we could talk about him for a whole other podcast, but he was sick for quite some time, and he passed away a couple weeks after Pesach, right around Shiloh's first birthday. Yeah, right around Shiloh's first birthday. And the night before, we had actually we decided we wanted to start trying again. And we did one transfer that didn't work. And it was also a day similar to what I described with the IUI. I don't cry easily in general, but I found myself sitting in the offices in Shari Tzedek, like crying to Ari on the phone. They were like the people, again, very holy people that work there. I have nothing against them. They're wonderful people. My experience that day was I was being ignored. I was being passed from one person to the next. This was a follow-up visit after a failed transfer in order to like plan the next treatment. And it was a new doctor, and I just felt like she wasn't being understanding. And I was literally the last person that, these offices often are, the IVF offices are open from like 6 to like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. They do like early hours.
Yeah.
And it was already like 2:00 in the afternoon. They were getting ready. The secretaries were leaving. And I was like, I was just hysterical. I was so upset. And Ari even said to me on the phone in the hospital, he's like, I feel like something good is going to come from today. And I'm like, I didn't go through any treatment today. Like nothing's happening today. So, anyways, a week or two passed, and I was waiting for my next cycle, wasn't coming. And in my head, I was just still hurt from this day in the hospital. I was like, they messed me up. whatever they did, it was that last cycle. I don't know what they did, but it messed me up. And now and then suddenly the thought just like popped in my head, like maybe I should get a blood test. Maybe I should see what. So I got the Hafnaya for a blood test, and Thursday night, I want to say it was April 13th, Thursday night, I got the results for the blood test that showed I was pregnant
Wait, so naturally.
naturally.
Wow.
And that just like blew us away because here I was 43 and had never gotten pregnant naturally before in our,
Wow.
5 years of marriage. And we were just floored, totally floored.
Wow.
The next day, my father-in-law passed away, Friday, April 14th. So we sort of forgot about it for a few weeks, which I think is the best thing to do because you can't really, you can't go for your ultrasound for a few weeks and you get, so we just like put it on the side. But, the Chazal teach us often that Hashem sends the refuah before the makkah. And we really felt like this was such a nechama for our family. The first boy being born after he passed. And that's why his name is Mordechai for my father-in-law. And he was born on the 8th night of Hanukkah, Zot Hanukkah. It was a very, very special
Wow.
night. A very, very fast labor. Like from my first contraction till him coming out was 2 hours.
Wow.
We were very lucky to have made it to the hospital. And it was about 2 months into the war. And we had been learning from a sefer a couple weeks before he was born about Shimshon, the story of Shimshon Agibor. And Shimshon, depending on how you read the story and what commentaries you read, can get a bad rap, as they say. Getting involved in different relationships in order to serve his purpose as the warrior and to bring down the Plishtim. But as a friend of ours, a very close friend of ours, explained it to us, was that what is the shamish? The shamish on our Chanukiah. We're not allowed to use the other candles, right? We're not allowed to use them for any benefit, for any hana. So that's what the shamish says. The shamish says, "I'm here, tishtamshu bi, use me."
Yeah.
That's why he's called the shamish, right?
Yeah.
Use me instead. Fall back on me. And Shimshon, where people like to attribute his name to Shemesh, the sun, and a whole other explanation, perhaps his role was saying like, I'll take the fall, literally. I'll
Wow.
take the responsibility because I'm going to get the job done. And he was the last person who knew how to handle our enemies in that manner, in getting the job done. And he took the fall for it. So we felt very connected to that with the beginning of the war, with the pain that Am Yisrael was going through, is still going through. So we named him Mordechai Shimshon.
Wow. So, okay. And, there's been so much that we have discussed, so much that we have spoken about. I guess to wrap it all up, do you have anything else that you want to add?
I think I would say, addressing the name of your podcast, which I like, the anything but traditional. I don't think anyone really is traditional because part of our journey in this world is really finding what's unique about each one of us and connecting to that. Whether it's through an individual talent, through our service of Hashem, connecting those two, whatever it might be. And I guess what I want to say is like, that's the charge that everybody has, is to figure out how each one of us is anything but traditional and how we capitalize on that for our own journeys, for our own growth. And I think that's just a message that I'd want to share. Meaning, I feel like I've said so many times in these recordings with you, like I feel so blessed. I feel so just honored. Thank you for the time to spend with you, but so privileged to be able to share this positive story with whoever's listening. But everybody has that untraditional story to tell.
For sure.
And I think the story is just, someone might look at themselves and say, I don't know, I'm just plain Jane. I don't know, nothing special, nothing. But I think it's the lens through which you look at it. You can tell your story in an inspiring way. It just, you have to look for those points that will that will give hope to others or make others laugh or whatever your goal is. Yeah.
For sure. No, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Shaena, the last question of this whole adventure. As
Yes.
for when are you guys going to have us for Shabbat?
Yes.
We got to get on that. Is there a pasuk or a quote that you have held on to throughout this whole crazy adventure of finding your bashert, getting married, having children?
Can I say two?
Of course.
So I think I would separate it into my journey as a single person in this world, and then my journey as, I would say, a married person, but not specifically as being married. This like chapter 2, let's call it.
Okay.
So chapter 1, I think something that really pushed me and grounded me for a long time was Rabbi Nachman saying, "L'kol makom shani olech, ani olech la'eretz Yisrael." For the time before I moved to Israel, it was quite literal that I knew I always wanted to move here, and there were going to be stops along the way, and I didn't know where they were going to take me. But as long as my eye was on the prize, it didn't matter if I had to stay in Washington Heights for a couple of years and then go here for there and this and that. But wherever I'm going, bein time, in the meantime, I'm going to end up there. But then that it converted even once I was here and living in Yerushalayim for 13 years, looking for my bashert, looking for my place in this community, which is a whole other challenge. I applied the same concept. I was already in Eretz Yisrael, but it was lakom makom sheni olech, ani olech le whatever that dream is, whatever that vision is.
Wow.
To keep my eye on that goal, and that even though it feels like there are so many detours, wherever I'm going, I'm eventually and essentially going to that place, to my goal. So that's number 1. And then I think chapter 2, the whole set of challenges with the farm and the challenges about our viability living out there and with children and with our age and all of those things. Everything that kind of throws into question of like, is this the right decision? What are we doing? And od milvado. That is, I would say, for me and Ari both together, a very, very grounding and focusing mantra, pasuk, and just to know that like essentially everything comes down to Hashem and what his intentions are, quote unquote intentions and plan, and it's okay. This fails, that fails. We are here. They're going to shut down our electricity. Literally 2 weeks ago, Ari's like, there might be an electricity shutdown next week. I'm not sure. Like Shaena, a few years ago, would not have slept that night. Like,
Wow.
and that's even before having children that I want to keep warm and fed. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at anything now, but flexing that Enod Milvado muscle for the last number of years has really, really helped me and us with our focus and with doing what we do.
Wow. So last thing. Can you plug the farm where you guys live and just like what what you love about it and why people should come visit? And
Sure. So we live on the Arugot Farm. It's on the southeastern tip of Judea. We are the Jews farthest south in Yehuda. Jews are called Jews because we're from Judea. The first Jew to be called a Yehudi in Tanakh. Any guess? Any guess?
Yehuda?
Mordechai HaYehudi.
Oh, Mordechai.
And it's not because he was from Shevet Yehuda. He was from Shevet Binyamin. We see that. But he was from Judea. So
Fascinating.
that is why we are who we are, because we're indigenous to the Judean land, and we should return to the Judean land. And that is what we're doing by living out there. We live there with 3 other families. We are 2 kilometers from the nearest yeshuv, and we run a farm that is on the state land that's approved for agriculture and tourism. So we have groups, families, buses come out to us, seminaries, yeshivas come to us all the time for a day trip, for a Shabbos, a Shabbaton, Shabbat Chatan. We've had a wedding or 2. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place, Arugot Farm. You could look it up on Instagram or Facebook. And
Wow.
it's I mean, the idea is for it to be a center of inspiration, education. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Shaena, for coming on.
Thank you for this
Pleasure.
opportunity.
And I can't wait to come to the farm.
Okay. We'll
Okay.
schedule.
All the best. Bye.
Bye, Tamar.